On this month's episode of the Pats Podcast, we are checking in with athletic trainers from around the state to see how their daily routine has changed due to the pandemic. Stick around. Let's be better athletic trainers. Before we start, I'd like to take a minute to thank UPMC Sports Medicine for their continued support of athletic trainers in the state of Pennsylvania and PATS. For more information, please visit them at www.upmcsportsmedicine.com. Janelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what your pre-pandemic athletic training position looked like.
Sure. Well, I started my athletic training career, got my undergrad degree at Messiah College, now Messiah University, had my master's through California University of Pennsylvania, and began working at Dickinson in 2002, became the head athletic trainer in 2009, and had a pretty traditional athletic trainer role here at Dickinson pre-pandemic. We have 4 full-time athletic trainers here at Dickinson, have a great team. We work together well. One of them is on this call. Shout out, Adam Richmond. And we have 3 full service athletic training rooms at Dickinson. I oversee one of them where my primary sports were or are men's and women's soccer, softball, and baseball. And so pre-pandemic, I was doing the normal athletic training duties where was covering practices and games, treating athletic injuries, doing rehab, getting athletes back on the field as quickly as I could. As part of my, head athletic trainer role, I was also doing administrative duties and was also serving on our senior staff in the athletic department and serving on other committees, but primarily was serving in a pretty traditional role.
So not only having a full plate of duties, you still had to deal with Adam as well.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a full-time job in itself. So
yes.
She doesn't get any extra pay for that either. But so Janelle, Dickinson College, it's Division III. You have that very traditional athletic training job. I think we obviously we both do. What you typically think of as athletic training is what we do. And then the pandemic hit, and your role has changed quite a bit. And I'm just curious, can you talk about what your role looks like now as the head athletic trainer at Dickinson College, how you were identified to kind of change that role, and just discuss the new position as Janelle Nolt, head athletic trainer at Dickinson College?
Mm-hmm. Sure. When the pandemic hit, I was actually traveling with our softball team in Arizona. So I had a kind of front row seat to see how the pandemic was beginning to affect athletics. And so as we were at our tournament and we saw different teams from all over the country getting phone calls from their athletic directors, their institutions back home, saying, hey, get your team on a flight home immediately. Like, we're not sure if you're going to be able to get home if you don't leave now, or having, teams getting on their buses and leaving the fields immediately, teams having their seasons canceled and just being in tears, knowing that they're not going to be able to finish their season was really an impactful way to see the pandemic and its effect firsthand. And obviously having to work with our team and travel back home during that time was a challenge. And obviously seeing how the D1 situation was handling it during that time. The D1 championships were being canceled as we were out in Arizona as well. Was just challenging to see. And then obviously as we come home and having a lot of uncertainty surrounding, our spring seasons, and not only our spring seasons, but our spring semester, and would we return to campus? And then obviously as we roll into summer and trying to figure out what our fall would look like. And so, my position in athletic training as a head athletic trainer and trying to figure out, how do we turn the corner and how do we look towards the fall and how do we begin to prepare for athletics was really a challenge. And as in most cases, is as you begin to ask questions and ask good questions and people realize that you're asking really good questions that they don't have the answers to, you often begin to get put on committees. And that's really what started to happen to me is, I just started asking really good questions of people across campus of, how are we going to handle a testing protocol? Are we going to do a school-wide plan to do a symptom tracking system? Or how are we going to handle ordering PPE? Is it my responsibility to do it just for my department? Or are we going to try and do a school-wide system? And so in prep for this interview, or this podcast, I actually went back and looked at some of those emails from the summer, and that's really how it started. And I have one email that I found in particular where I really just laid it all out and was like, these are the things I'm concerned about. Like, I need to be writing a return to sport plan, and like, we don't have answers for these. What should we do? And they were like, we don't either. Come join our committees. And so that's how I got really assigned to a lot of the committees I'm on now.
Yeah. So basically, as one of the only, well, not only, but one of the few healthcare professionals on campus, you were asking good questions, right? And trying to push athletics forward when the administration realized that, hey, here's a very qualified healthcare professional that gets this and can help us, has questions, but can also help get us answers, right? So can you just, tell us what a typical day looks like for you now compared to what it did? Obviously, I think we all know what typical athletic training looks like, but what does your day look like now?
Yeah. So a lot of what my day looks like is spending time in meetings and on Zoom. And so even though, we're kind of transitioning back into a little bit of sport, I still spend a lot of time in Zoom meetings. And prior to, Dickinson, we just returned to campus this semester. Last semester, I was doing 6 to 8 hours of Zooms a day just because of all the meetings I was involved in. And just for example, I was on the health and safety committee, and then we had subcommittees of that. So the testing committee, the contact tracing committee, the quarantine and illness committee. We had a variety of committees to just try and plan for how to come up with a comprehensive system to handle return to campus. And so, we're in a much better place now, and we have kids on campus and things are going well, but it took a lot of hours of planning to get to that place. So most of my days now my meetings are focused more in the morning. So morning heavy with Zooms. And then normally by the afternoon, I try not to take any Zoom meetings in the afternoon so I can see athletes and do my rehabs in the afternoon, and then eventually get to practice coverage in the evenings, afternoons and evenings. And, as I mentioned, we have a great team of athletic trainers at Dickinson. And so they know what I'm doing on the admin end and meeting end. And so they have really kind of taken over a lot of the more traditional work in the athletic training world so that I am available to still be involved in what's happening on the admin and across campus side, because I still am very involved in all of that. And it's important for athletics to still have that role and that voice and that input into what's happening across campus. One of the meetings that I'm involved in is the COVID response team meeting that we have every Monday, where we talk about the cases we have on campus and how we're responding to them. And because athletics, we are a good portion of the population that's on campus right now. It's important to talk those cases and make sure that everyone is on the same page with that.
Do you feel that during this whole process, meeting with the other departments on campus, that they figured out what athletic training was? Were they kind of had a preset mind beforehand and you changed it? I'm interested to see how these meetings progress throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people didn't know what we did. I think a lot of people still really had that idea of, their athletics and they're on that other side of campus, and, athletic trainers probably are just, working in the gym or, they're just, like our coaches, and they work with our teams, and they really didn't understand that we are qualified healthcare professionals. And I think just in the knowledge that I came to the table with, especially around testing and contact tracing, really just, I think, proved that we are competent healthcare professionals. And, I'm in meetings with nurse practitioners, and we're all talking the same language. And I think that that has gone a long way in educating people that, athletic trainers, what they are is, I think, definitely has given people a different frame of mind when they think of what athletic trainers are and do. We were involved in our testing protocol. All the athletic trainers at Dickinson helped with the return to campus protocols and involved in our testing protocols, and just, again, being labeled as healthcare professionals is a key part of that educational process.
How do you think that your athletic training background kind of gave you a leg up on working with the pandemic situation?
Yeah, I think, obviously our broad base of knowledge is key in how we approach emerging topics in medicine, right? Like, we're always staying up to date on the new trends in medicine, and I think COVID is just another one of those areas. So always staying on the cutting edge, always trying to learn the latest update. I think that was just really important as we were going through the phases of COVID, is just always trying to stay on top of the latest update. I think also athletic trainers are just very used to being adaptable, right? Like, okay, well, this is not what we do anymore. We do it this way. And we know how to do that. Like, we used to be doing it this way. It's not the way you're supposed to do it anymore. Now we do it this way. So I think just being adaptable and knowing that we've done that all along and being able to make that switch pretty easily, I think helps us. I think also just being used to working in an environment that's fast-paced and working with people and being able to communicate well, and just be okay with being in an environment that's a little chaotic and a little fast-paced. I know when the athletic trainers were helping with like the testing site and setting up the testing site, I think there was, like, it's basically arranging physicals, right? Yep. Like, all athletic trainers know how to run physicals and know how to run stations and make physicals run smoothly for a lot of people in a short amount of time. And I think for some other professionals who just are used to seeing people in just very small, like small groups in a longer period of time, it just was like this complicated math problem, and we're like, it's physicals. You set up stations and you run people through. And so I do think athletic trainers just have this unique skill set that just know how to problem solve and know how to approach a complicated dilemma that they can solve quickly. Yeah.
I love that. And I completely agree. I was part of that process. So yeah, the chaos that was, and then, you kind of troubleshoot through it, and then all of a sudden it's not chaos anymore, which is great. Mm-hmm. I guess my last question would be, do you feel like having that medical background helps you communicate or speak the same language as some of the physicians and other healthcare professionals, right? Like you guys have, we're not surgeons, but we can talk to a surgeon, right? Like we can be on that same page. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can also be that go-between. And I think that I've as a healthcare professional, you can speak that language and you can speak the medical terminology, but you can also explain it in a way that the layperson can understand. And I feel like in a lot of the meetings that I've been in, I've been able to do both, where I feel like sometimes people are using more of the medical terminology, and the people who are in the meetings that are more on the admin side that maybe aren't understanding like the medical language, I've been able to be like, if we think about it this way, you can sometimes like mesh the two and like have people actually have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what I was thinking too. And that's our job every day, right? Like it's okay, this is what the doctor said, but this is what the doctor actually meant. And then you interpret that for the athlete, right?
Right. I think even just when we talk about like quarantine and isolation and like close contacts, like I feel like I've been in so many meetings where people were using the terminology incorrectly and people were just so confused about what was supposed to be happening. And to actually just clarify for people, what we're talking about is when you send someone who's sick, you can't, so yeah. I think just using lay language in situations where when lay language is appropriate, but then also knowing that when you're talking to nurse practitioners and physicians, using the appropriate language so that you have that credibility that they know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a big piece of that athletic training education background that we all have. So I love it.
Janelle, I want to thank you again for being on the show and for sharing your insight and your experience with the pandemic. Up next, we have two more guests. We have Dr. Jason Siebick from Duquesne University. Jason is an associate professor within the Rango School of Health Sciences at Duquesne University, and he is serving as the chair for the Department of Athletic Training, where he also serves as the program director for the athletic training program, as well as the health sciences program. Jason also brought along his student, Christine, to talk to us about what has been happening at Duquesne during the pandemic. Jason and Christine, thank you for coming on the show.
Of course.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, this is great.
So, Jason, I guess let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how, what position you're currently in and what your typical role looks like in your position pre-pandemic.
Oh, all right. So, as Phil mentioned, I'm the chair of our Department of Athletic Training. I've been at Duquesne University for the last 15 years. I've been in my current role as department chair and program director for the last 8 years. Ordinarily, my role consists of teaching a few classes each semester and then overseeing the administrative side of the management of an athletic training education program, taking care of accreditation and compliance issues with that, and just overseeing kind of the day-to-day functions of our department. We're really fortunate. We have, in addition to myself, we have 4 full-time faculty. We have an administrative assistant. Our students come into our program as freshmen, and they're with us all the way through for 4 years. So it's, most of my days, it's really a combination of teaching a little bit in the morning, teaching a couple of classes in the morning, early afternoon, and then transitioning into just the administrative side of program and department management. And we recently started up a new health sciences major as well. So that's kind of added an additional layer, if you will, to things. So it's a full-time job.
Right.
But it's something that, it's been a tremendous experience. I'm really fortunate to work with great individuals, great students. So it's all in all, life is good.
Nice. So, Christine, same question, but so let's start off. What year are you in undergrad right now?
So I'm currently in my junior year.
So you're a junior, and so you've been in the athletic training program prior to the pandemic. Can you just share what a typical day looks like for you and what your experience has been like, pre-pandemic? Like, what do you typically do as an athletic training student?
So a bit of the transition in the program going from pre-professional phase to professional phase for me was happening right as all this pandemic stuff was going on. So my role as a student has shifted a lot during the last year. But prior to that, I actually started in the athletic training program as a sophomore. So right before the pandemic, that's when I first started with the athletic training courses, we first start to get our clinical education experience started. We can shadow with several different sites that we have with the university. We can go with the juniors and seniors with their official placements. So getting a lot of different experience in the classroom and at clinical sites as a sophomore. And then that role just kind of transitions more as you get to the professional phase, which is what I'm in now, my junior year.
Awesome.
So now, Jason, it's been almost a year to the day from when things started to shut down. I think NBA canceled their first game like 362 days ago or something like that. How has things shifted in the department? I can't even imagine what being a program director looks like right now.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this time frame last year. Because we had a lot of stuff going on. When this all started to happen, we were on spring break. Students were home, students were traveling. I know myself, I was on the road doing some recruiting at that time, and was really kind of keeping track of everything that was going on. So when we came back to campus that week after spring break, things happened fast. I was actually helping out a little bit that Wednesday after spring break. I was looking back at my calendar and was helping out with a soccer practice on a Wednesday morning. And it was clear that things were changing, and they were changing fast. And, as an athletic trainer, you're always in that mindset of planning for what's next. Most of the time it's, how do I prevent this from happening? Or what is the next thing that I have to be prepared for? And I remembered standing on the field while I was watching practice thinking, I'm going to have to assemble the faculty, and we're going to have to start to come up with a plan quickly, because this situation is evolving. And at that time, I thought I was ahead of the curve. Well, by Friday, when we had our meeting, we had already had numerous conversations about what was happening and how quickly things were really kind of devolving. So, we really went into troubleshooting mode right away, and looking ahead to how we were going to have to pivot. And it started with, let's think about, we're going to be moving to online here in a matter of days. What do we need to prepare for? What do we need to bring home with us? Because we may not be back on campus. And in the moment that we had that conversation, we all still thought that we were going to be back on campus a little bit the following week. And by the time the weekend ended, we weren't back on campus at all.
Yeah. Nope.
Right. It was, we went in, we picked things up, and that was it. So it really became a matter of first making sure that we knew we had everything that we needed to move forward, but more importantly, making sure that we were in contact with the students to reassure them of what was happening, when it was happening, what our plans were, and really just communicating. I think that's the thing that we all we do, I think, a pretty good job on the whole communicating within our department and with our students already, but we had to ramp it up even more because things were constantly changing, and we just had to make sure we kept everyone on the same page. And, I oftentimes look back and joke with colleagues that, some colleagues that were teaching online at that time, they would have months to prepare for that transition. We had 5 or 6 days. So, and it wasn't just putting our classes online. It was also thinking about everything that we still had to accomplish during the remaining 7 weeks of the semester, and what that would look like in terms of equipment needs and space needs, and what would exams look like, and how would we administer all of that and keep everything moving in that same direction. At the same time, also keeping in mind that clinical education also had to happen. Or we had to figure out what was going to happen with clinical education. And we were really fortunate at that point because our students had just come through an evaluation period, and students were ahead of pace with where I think we probably expected them to be at the midpoint of the semester. So that really took some of the pressure off there. It gave us as faculty and our students a little bit more breathing room there. So we really were able to focus on getting our classes dialed in as quickly as we could, making that transition, figuring out how to teach online. None of us had really ever taught online before, so there was this huge learning curve, and a lot of emails, a lot of phone conversations. But within a week's time, I mean, we were up and running, and I couldn't have been happier about the approach that my faculty and staff took. The students were fantastic throughout. And then, once that started, it was really a matter of looking ahead, because it became clear, I think, to all of us real quickly that this was not going to go away anytime soon. So we really started to look well past the spring semester and really started to plan for what the fall would look like. And I commented to our students during our summer orientation about that planning for the fall started, on March 13th, it felt like we started to plan for the fall semester, because that's when we found out that things were moving online. And from that point forward, it was thinking about how we would restructure our classes, how we would restructure our classrooms, what would clinicals look like, what cleaning policies would we have to put into place, just a whole host of new policies and procedures, and figuring out how that would align with the university and really with best practices. A lot of us were spending a lot of time online, attending different webinars, doing a lot of research, meeting with other healthcare professionals to figure out what the next steps were going to look like and what we would have to plan for, as we made our way through the summer and into the fall.
Now, did accreditation have any say or any kind of recommendations? Or, I mean, I'm sure moving like testing and stuff like that probably affects that kind of stuff too.
I'll tell you, the Katie was really fantastic in terms of making sure that they kept programs in the loop in terms of what they were thinking. So ordinarily, if a program is having to make dramatic changes to how their program is being delivered, you have to notify the Katie of what those changes look like, because you have to make sure that you're going to be able to continue delivering things in an appropriate manner. And very early on in the process, they came out and said, we understand what people are dealing with. We understand you're having to make changes. Know that we understand that. Continue to do what you have to do. Follow your university guidelines. And really, I mean, they were really fantastic with it. And as they had information, they were getting that out to program directors as well, which was really great. There was never a time, and there hasn't been a time throughout the pandemic that I've ever felt like we didn't have that support from the Katie. If we had questions, as new things were happening, the information was there for us to be able to make the best decisions for our students and their continued progression through our academic program.
So now I know some of our listeners might not be familiar with how Duquesne's set up. The Rango School of Health Science, its own kind of little school within itself. It's in the old gymnasium. And my question is, with PT and OT and PA that also operate out of that building, did you guys have like a big come together where you were deciding like how to get back to class, cleaning procedures, things like that as a school of health science? Or was it more like a big Duquesne board where everybody got together and kind of made the plan?
Yeah, so we had a lot of meetings. I mean, there were meetings every week, whether they were school related meetings amongst the department chairs. Departments were having individual meetings, but the university also was doing a lot to keep people in the loop. Our provost, David Dawsey, early on in the pandemic, started having open forums for university faculty. And it was a chance for us to come together as faculty to talk about what was happening, to ask questions, to get information. And they were really very open and honest conversations. His background in public health and epidemiology was invaluable because he has a true understanding of what a pandemic looks like. And those meetings, I would leave those meetings feeling like we had information or a new understanding of how the university was approaching things. And that then gave us a chance to go back to our individual departments in the school to have additional conversations. So to your point, within our School of Health Sciences, all the departments within the school have a really tremendous working relationship. I can pick up the phone or send somebody an email and know that we can have a conversation about just about anything. And that was happening a lot. Where we were bouncing ideas off of one another. It was different though. I mean, we obviously couldn't just pop down the hall, but we were checking in with one another and really trying to troubleshoot what we would need to do. Things as simple as figuring out how best to approach securing PPE. I mean, that was a huge concern early on, not just within the school, but across the university and obviously globally as well. So we had a lot of those conversations about what are some of the best practices, what are people hearing, how do we move forward, to really and in the process, not only maintaining the progress of our programs, but really our students, and we were, as an athletic training program, we were fortunate in that we didn't have classes that we had to teach during the summer, where a lot of our other professional programs within the school, they had students that were supposed to complete summer classes and summer clinical experiences. So there was a lot of conversation and discussion around that. How do we adjust our schedules? How do we adjust the model that we're using to make sure that everyone continues to move forward and graduates on time? So I think we were somewhat sheltered from that. So we had a chance to really kind of sit back, watch what was happening, provide input and feedback where we could, but at the same time, it helped us to really prepare and think ahead for what our students and what we would have to deal with come the fall semester.
That's just absolutely crazy. And I think this would be a good point to get Christine's kind of take on how this happened. I remember junior year at Duquesne for me, just getting in your first clinical, second semester, you really kind of get the groove on, and then now everything's changing. And I'm sure it was changing by the day. One day it would be one thing, one day it would be another. Talk a little bit about what your experience was.
Yes, absolutely. So starting back at the very beginning, 1 year ago today, I was actually on a study abroad trip. So I was in Europe with my psychology course.
Wow.
Yep, we came back to campus on Sunday night. On Wednesday, we got sent home. And then kind of progressing from there, it was early summer that I received my first clinical placement, and I was very, very excited. I got the one that I had kind of been anticipating with Duquesne football. And really throughout the whole summer, it was, how is this going to happen? What is this going to look like? And it wasn't until I was on the plane back out to Pittsburgh that I got word that they were sending the athletes home to quarantine and there would be no football season.
Man.
So there was a lot of back and forth on that, obviously, with all of this that's been going on. It's been changes every day. So
absolutely,
just trying to see how fall sports were going to work was a big challenge. What could they do? What couldn't they do? What testing needed to be done? What quarantining needed to be done? So that was a lot of pivoting. And so my first clinical rotation being with Duquesne football in the fall was not your typical rotation, as they were not officially playing sports. So that looked a little different. But now at my current rotation, I am at Moon Area High School, so a bit of a different setting, but they do have athletics going on. So even just that transition from the fall to the spring has been very crucial for me in my clinical placements.
No, that's awesome. So that's a good transition into, I mean, I'll start with Jason, and I guess, Jason, what I would like to know from you is, as you had to pivot and dive into this pandemic and prepare yourself to be able to teach online and to be able to safely administer this clinical education, how did your athletic training background and education prepare you for that?
I don't think there was anything specific that there was no class that said this is how you prepare for a pandemic, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen. It might happen now. But I think what I fell back to was something that came out of my undergraduate education very early on. It was, at the time, the primary responsibility of an athletic trainer is to prevent injury and illnesses. And that was something that has always been right at the front of things. And that was how we approached this. When we met with our students in the summer, even before they were starting to come back for clinicals, it was, this is what we're doing. Everything that we put in place, the conversations we're having are all about protecting the health and safety of students, faculty, staff, top to bottom. There's no question. There are no questions. That is what our priority is. The education piece will fall in, and it'll all happen. So, I think that was really the mindset that we all went into it with, was how do we make sure we keep everyone safe? And that's what you do as an athletic trainer, right? So the planning, the preparation, we always plan for the known and the unknown as an athletic trainer, and that's what we were being forced to do. And there was a lot that was unknown, and we just kind of pulled out all the stops for it. It was a lot of conversations, a lot of emails. We attended a lot of different Zoom conversations just to continue to educate ourselves to be in the best position possible to hopefully have things move forward, right? And we told the students just before classes started up, we've done all this preparation. Hopefully it's not all for naught. Like this is where the rubber meets the road. And so I think it's just something I think that's ingrained in us. I think as a profession, we were, as much upheaval as we've all experienced, I think as a profession and as professionals, we had the preparation necessary to do it. It was just a matter of kind of flipping that switch and saying, how do we put the same skill set to use now? And,
exactly. I completely agree. And I think we've all done a really great job of it. And I think this has really highlighted our skill set as athletic trainers. And I love that you guys have been able to pivot and do that successfully. So, kudos to you. Christine, same kind of question, but I guess kind of twofold. How do you feel like you're, I know you're just a junior and you haven't had the full education yet, but how has your education so far kind of helped you in this situation? And then, what are you going to take away from the situation as you move forward in your career? How's that going to prepare you or better prepare you for, job after college?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I was kind of thinking about with this question is the way that we're taught in class to approach when an athlete or a patient comes into your clinic. They present to you with certain things. You see what you can find out from them, what else information you need to gather, and then you see how you can best attack that plan to benefit that athlete. Each athlete comes in with a completely different scenario. Maybe some things are similar from before, maybe it's totally different. And that's kind of how things have been going with all of this. Each day it might be a new challenge that you might know how to address parts of it. Maybe some parts you're a little unsure, but you can see what information you can gather from that, and just doing whatever you can for your athletes or what the professors have been able to do for the students every day, taking that and seeing how you can progress with what you do have.
Love that. I love that. Yeah. And so, can you think of anything specific that, has really any experiences so far that have kind of changed your outlook or your thought process during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that it's been easier to adjust than I would have thought based on the incredible resources, the incredible community that we have, especially here in the athletic training department. It's been quite a wild ride, but I don't think that my education, or for the most part, my clinical experiences have been detrimentally impacted by this. We've been able to adjust, and we're still getting the material, whether it's on Zoom or in the classroom. And so certain days are hands-on, certain days are on Zoom. So still being able to get such an exciting and great education. Meanwhile, everything is kind of changing day to day. Things are crazy all the time, but still getting that education no matter what.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. That is awesome.
That's a cool look on it.
For sure. Cool. Phil, anything else?
I don't know. There's so many more questions that we can go into this. Like at Moon, Christine, at Moon, how difficult was it to kind of get in a groove of doing your evaluations? And was there like any hesitancy from the student athletes that were there?
I think it was more hesitancy on my end because based on my rotation in the fall, I didn't have as many acute injuries where I would need to assess patients on a day-to-day basis. So this was almost like, in a way, it was more like a first rotation for me, but here I am coming into my second semester. And these athletes are just out here. A lot of the high schools here were playing in the fall, so they're used to this continuous, like their sports were obviously halted in the spring last year, but they've been able to keep playing. So it's normal for them. And here I am coming into this new role for me. And obviously it affects everyone. They're playing their basketball games with their masks on and all those different things. So
Their masks on.
on,
Yeah.
on. Yes. Yes. That.
Awesome. Jason, Christine, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know Adam really appreciates this.
Absolutely.
And I think this is going to be a good show for National Athletic Training Month.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So Adam, National Athletic Trainers Month. I think this podcast really sums up, and I want to echo what Jason said, that when things get tough, going back to the basics really is the core of what an athletic trainer is. We go back to the basics and we get things done. We're able to pivot. I think we've heard pivot more times during this podcast than I have in the last few years.
Yeah, I agree, Phil. And I think you nailed it with that, right? Athletic trainers get stuff done. We are constantly put in situations where we need to pivot or we need to scramble and figure things out, and that's on a regular basis, right? Like whether it's a coach changing a practice at the last minute, a competition getting rescheduled, or whatever it may be, that is the name of the game for athletic training. It is you're never in the best situation, and you just have to figure out how to get the job done, and get it done well. And I think we excel at that for sure.
Absolutely.
I think another piece of athletic training that is critical that we mentioned is that we are healthcare providers, right? We're not just the water boys. We're not just the folks that tape ankles, right? We are qualified healthcare professionals that have a extremely strong background in multiple areas of healthcare, right? We get, we're not experts at anything really. I mean, I think if we had to pick one thing, it's probably, orthopedic or emergency care, right? That's probably our niche, but we are exposed and educated on everything under the sun when it comes to healthcare, right? We have to know a little bit about everything to successfully be able to do our job. And I think that really came to light during this pandemic, that we are healthcare professionals. We are knowledgeable and we are skilled, and, put us in the right situation and we can excel and do the job that needs to be done. So I think that really came to light during this pandemic.
I thought it was really cool that it even made it up to the state level, where they expanded our Practice Act for some time to include populations outside of the physically active population that we normally work with. You saw some of the larger hospitals and clinics in the state pull in athletic trainers to help with vaccine distribution, to help with running clinic, to help with hospital services, whether that was environmental or screeners or just the day-to-day helping with patient flow, which, I mean, if you think about it, that's preseason PPE, pre-participation exams. I don't know any other group that runs them as well as athletic trainers.
We are constantly providing quality healthcare to large groups of people at once, right? It's not the traditional, physical therapy clinic where you typically have maybe one or two patients coming through every hour. It's not, a doctor's office where you're seeing one patient at a time. We do mass baselines for concussion testing, for physicals, for blood pressure, for vitals. We do that on a regular basis, and that is what was needed in this pandemic, right? We needed to learn how to get large groups of people organized and orchestrated through testing procedures, contact tracing, quarantining, isolating, like all that stuff, that we had a really solid background. Like, we understood the science, we understood the medical part of it, but then had that expertise of orchestrating large groups of people at one time. And I think that just really highlighted our skill set as athletic trainers.
Yeah, keeping the quality of care, the standard of care at the same high level that you're expected, but just scaling it up to larger numbers.
Yeah, for sure. I know at Dickinson, we were pretty involved. Obviously, Janelle was on the call and talked about her involvement in just being, that voice of reason and that medical professional on a lot of these committees across campus, making decisions for the whole campus, but also specifically within our testing procedure and trying to run, again, mass quantities of people through a testing procedure that looked very similar to a physical process. And again, I think that our administration recognized that, hey, here's a group of healthcare professionals that are on our campus, and yeah, they knew that we existed, but in the past, we had no reason to interact with that side of campus. And now that we did, I think they realized, like, hey, here's a solid group of people that can really help us get stuff done. And again, I'm appreciative of that. I think that we were able to do that successfully, which hopefully shows other healthcare groups and legislators that, hey, this is a group of people that are solid. They know their stuff. They're well educated. They're very skilled. And, they didn't kill anybody during the pandemic, right? Like we were treating people that weren't physically active and nothing bad happened, right? I think that's a solid for us, and hopefully that promotes us as a solid healthcare profession, so we can move forward and continue to treat people that are not the traditional physically active person, right? I think we need to really push to try to get rid of that.
I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Absolutely.
And then we heard from Christine, the student experience over the last year. I have such fond memories of undergrad and just the deer in headlights starting my first clinical rotation, and that was during normal times. And here our upcoming class of juniors and seniors started it during the pandemic, where everything they learned the year before completely changed, and they even had to pivot. Like it was completely just across the entire industry, pivot and shift.
Isn't that a special test?
I think so.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree, Phil. And I think if I was in her shoes currently, what a confidence booster, right? Like, what do you you get out in the real world and you're working on your own. Like, what are you gonna experience that is outside of what you've already experienced with the pandemic, right? Like, your confidence should be super high, and your ability to kind of understand that I can deal with anything should be super high after an experience like that.
Yeah, I didn't get my first kind of it's hit the fan moment until I was licensed, certified, and was the one responsible for everything. And then when everything hits the fan, you're just like, oh crap.
Yep. It's on me now.
Yep.
Where's my preceptor? Nope, it is on you now. Yep. Yeah. But no, I think, it's National Athletic Trainers Month. We really, I think we did a good job, and I hope the listeners agree that we've highlighted what athletic trainers really can do and how essential we are to healthcare.
I think that's a good message right there. Athletic trainers essential to healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to talk about, Phil?
I think this was an awesome episode. I think it's a good
too.
place to leave it.
Yeah, and I hope our audience appreciates the time that our guests put into talking to us and highlighting their skill set. And I just want to say thank you to our guests, Janelle, Jason, and Christine. Thanks for coming on the show and taking time out of your busy day to share with us. I also want to say a huge thank you to UPMC Sports Medicine for their sponsorship of this episode. If you need any more information from UPMC Sports Medicine, feel free to check them out at upmcsportsmedicine.com. And to our viewers and listeners, make sure that you like and subscribe. And until next time, I am Adam Richmond.
And I'm Philip Hensler.
And this was the Pats Podcast.